everyone, and welcome to today's unexpected update. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong, and I'm here today to give you an update on the latest from the Big Brother Canada 11 house. We had a Saturday drop, so here I am on a Saturday. Didn't expect to be here, but here we are. Good afternoon. you may not have even known that there was an update or a drop today because you didn't expect one, and because what we got, let me tell you, wasn't a lot. We got about 90 minutes, and they still haven't actually done nominations yet. So unfortunately, I cannot update you on the nominations, and the amount of Dan Zabo in this drop was roughly like 30 seconds. So I also can't exactly let you know what his plan is either. However, we did get at least one perhaps important piece of information from this drop. So we will get into that, as well as, again, just honestly continuing to try to figure out exactly where people stand and how they actually feel and play in this house is something that we are still trying to gather at this point. So let's get into it, and then we'll be off. And then I don't know, maybe there'll be another one tomorrow. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. All right. Anyway, we started the day with Rob, or the drop, I should say, with Rob and Dan. Dan is telling Rob, it's a very brief conversation, the first of like two Dan pieces of content that we get in the entire drop. Now, I guess it's worth resetting you here. Dan Zabo won the HOH. His closest ally, as far as we know, is Zach. And we know that Zach and Ty are looking to get Dan to target Rob, because they don't want Rob to stick around. They don't like that Rob is, giving out sweaters, and they feel like he's got too much influence over some of the other women. So they want Rob gone. And prior to the HOH, they were looking at Dan as a person that they could manipulate into doing that for them. So now that Dan has won HOH, we assume that that's going to be in play. On top of that, yesterday in the drop, we saw a conversation between Ty and Claudia where he sort of gave an indication that something could be afoot, especially with Rob. We're going to see some conversations today as well that indicate that there's some information out there that Rob could be in trouble. However, despite that, the first conversation we get in this drop is between Rob and Dan is very quickly telling Rob, hey, you're good. You've got nothing to worry about. And Rob says, wow, oh, I'm so grateful. And Dan says, I know you've got me too, Rob. We're in this. Rob says, of course. And that's about it. I mean, it was a very brief conversation. And I will tell you, it did not seem like the kind of conversation that you would have if you planned on putting this guy up on the block. So my sort of interpretation of this is that either Zach and Ty haven't really made their move yet to convince Dan to take out Rob, or they have decided against it, or they tried and failed, or theoretically it's possible that Dan is just playing Rob here. But my guess right now is that they haven't really made the big push yet. Dan does not seem to be talking a lot of game, so we'll see. This could be another instance of the HOH promising somebody safety and then Zach coming in and convincing them to do otherwise. Who knows? But Dan tells Rob, you're good. There is another possibility as well, which is that the plan for Rob has been tabled potentially because of another event, which we'll talk about very soon. In fact, we'll talk about it right now. Rob is going to go and talk to Hope. And Hope is in the bedroom. And Hope says, hey, do you trust me? And Rob says, of course. He says, okay, then I want you to get under the sheets with me. All right. And so they get under the bed sheets and they start making smooching noises. Fake smooching noises, to be clear. Before Hope opens up, he says, look, I'm really scared here. And Rob thinks he's joking at first. He's like, don't worry, I got you. He says, no, really, though. Like, in this house, I'm really scared. I don't fit in. And Rob says, it's all right. Like, we can make this work. And Hope says, no, I'm serious. I know the game is supposed to be like this, but it's so hard, man. So I told Dan to put me on the block, bro. Rob's like, really? He's like, yeah, I think it's time. Rob's like, oh. Oh man. Like, it's okay, man. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. You've made it far. Like, you really told him to put you on the block? Hope says, yeah. He says, honestly, Rob, I don't understand how you all do it here. I'm so unhappy. The thing is, I know I'm never gonna get an opportunity like this again. Rob's like, nah, you will. So again, this is sort of like another outside option here, which is that Dan may be feeling like, okay, Rob or Hope is one of my nominees for sure. So who knows? But Hope has apparently told Dan to put him on the block. Hope is apparently feeling like it's time for him to leave. If we didn't have enough bbcan 8 comparisons here, we are looking at somebody who is hoping to leave the game. They get to talking about the HOH a little bit. Rob is telling Hope, like, even if you are on the block, like, fight for that veto anyway. Use it on somebody else. Like, have fun with it. Go show them that you can win something. And they talk about the HOH competition. And just in case you needed more reason to be annoyed at this HOH competition, Hope says that he asked and he was told that you are allowed to take balls from opponents, essentially, in the HOH competition. So what that meant is that he could have taken Rob's balls in the HOH competition and helped Rob win by dunking points with Rob's balls. So it didn't happen, but again, just in case this wasn't a bro-y enough competition, the bros could have also gathered their resources and won in that way. Anyway, Hope is looking to leave the game. But the only people that know that right now are Rob, I think, and a little bit of an indication that Zach may know toward the end of this drop. And of course, I assume Dan knows because Hope said he talked to Dan about it. So we'll see where that goes. Claudia has a conversation with Shania. Just some brief comments here and there, really. There's a lot of conversations, a lot of talk of like what's going to happen with Dan, what is he going to do? Nobody really knows. And just a lot of like little sprinkled in pieces of game talk. Claudia says to Shania that she anticipates that Zach is going to have a lot of influence over the nominations. She's getting this from Ty. We heard Ty talk about this. So she's anticipating that Zach may have that influence, but she's telling Shania at least that she doesn't really know what that means or who, like what the nominations will be. However, we do know that she does actually have an idea that Rob could be in trouble. She's going to talk to Daniel about that a little bit later. So, and we heard that Ty talking to her about it. So she's hiding this information from Shania, the amount of detailed information that she actually has, at least in this brief conversation. Santina has a brief conversation with Renee. Renee says to Santina that she thinks the guys are going to rope in Dan to use him this week and then cut him next week. That's what she's concerned might happen. Santina says, well, I can tell you there's a lot of tension between the guys right now. So, who knows what might happen. Renee is also going to go to Hope. And Hope tells her, look, there's a lot of work still to be done. And she says, well, Hope, I want you to stick around. Now, she doesn't know, I think, that Hope is looking to leave. She says, look, Hope, I'm going to tell it to you straight. You can't be doing dumb stuff. He says, I'm an emotional guy. She says, you got to keep your personal stuff in line because when you piss people off, it makes it more difficult for me, says Renee. So Renee is trying to give him the pep talks that he was getting from the guys last week that they seem to have given up on. But I didn't get the sense that he was loving this conversation or that he was hearing her in any real meaningful way. I think he was mostly just like, just get me out of here. Left and right, people are coming at me. Kuzi's going to talk to Ty. And she's going to ask Ty what he thinks Dan is going to do. And Ty says, I'm not sure, but hopefully Zach is able to, and Kuzi says, well, is Zach going to be able to influence Dan this week? And the audio gets muffled here. There was a comment that Dan made that apparently scared Zach a little bit. I think it might have been something along the lines of I can't trust anybody in this house, or I don't know who I can trust. Something along the lines of not trusting people. And that scared Zach because he thought, hey, I'm supposed to be somebody he can trust. And so it may have been an indication that Dan doesn't trust Zach as much as Zach thought he did. But I mean, we're in deep speculation territory here because I didn't even hear what the comment was. Anika joins the conversation, and Ty is again saying it's on Zach to influence Dan in the right way. So he's really putting it out there that Zach is looking to influence Dan. And Anika says, yeah, hopefully Zach can influence Dan. Says Anika, there are some people that get power and they don't know how to use it. And I'm like, yeah, exactly, Anika. You're totally on point. You got it. She says, people, they get power, they don't know how to use it, and they end up doing something that's only to their advantage. I was like, wait, hold on. Did I hear that right? That you mean it's only for other people's? No, you said they'd only do something that's their own advantage. That's the wrong way to use power. Okay. All right. We're winging it. Daniel and Claudia are going to have a conversation. They think the guys are going to cling to Dan this week because he's in power. Daniel thinks that one of us, he says, might go up. But he says Rob could also be a nomination. He could be another nominee with one of us, or maybe it's two of us. Who knows? We don't know what's happening with Dan. So clearly Daniel is in the know about Rob being a potential nominee, and he's talking to Claudia openly about it. Worth pointing out. Daniel says this week, unlike last week, he is not going to go with whoever the house target is. He's going to take out whoever is best to go for his game. No more house stuff for Daniel. Claudia agrees. She leaves the room. Daniel talks to the cameras. And this is kind of the most we've gotten from Daniel in terms of up to date what his strategic thinking is. And I've got to say, maybe I just don't know enough about the structure of the house, but it was kind of confusing. Daniel says, I don't know, man. These women can't be trusted. The guys can't be trusted either. The middle people need to come together. Now, he explained to Anika that he saw the middle people as himself, Anika, Kuzi, And like, I'm trying to remember now. People like I think he mentioned Jonathan as a middle person. And I'm just not entirely sure what he sees as the house. But I know he does not see Kuzi as a middle person anymore. Vanessa was definitely one of them. Thank you. Um, I'll continue because he gives us a little bit more insight. But he says the middle people need to come together. He doesn't trust the women. He doesn't trust the guys. But the thing is that doesn't leave a lot of like, what does that mean? you know? He says we need to act like we're their numbers until we're able to essentially flip it around on them. The problem is how many people are we going to lose along the way while trying to show them that we're their numbers? Okay, yes. Fairly astute analysis there. Um, he says, Renee is my target. Daniel S. is his target. I don't know why I said Daniel. Dan S. is my target. He says, those are two people that will not affect my position with Santina, Zach, Kuzi, and Ty. It might affect it with Hope because Hope really likes Renee. But if she's going to keep playing this I'm not a threat thing while still having conversations and getting information, then that means she is a threat because what is she doing with that information? So he's looking at Renee, and that's confusing to me. And I don't know if that's because I don't have enough information or if it's because he doesn't have enough information. But he's looking at Renee and Dan as potential targets. Obviously, Dan is not going to go this week or anything, but there it is. He says also, and I know from my conversation with Kuzi that there is a girls' alliance because she asked, he says, Kuzi said to me, hey, if there was a girls' alliance, would you be willing to be in it, essentially? And so from that conversation, he knows, so there must be a girls' alliance. He says he also knows that there's a boys' alliance, and he knows that the boys are starting to go against each other because of what Vanessa spilled to him. What did Vanessa spill to him, and how does Vanessa know anything? He says, I'm keeping that in my back pocket right now. So there's enough to blow up if need be, but I need to show loyalty right now to all those people because my position in the game is weak. He says, though, you got to strike fast. You can't wait too long. So I'm trying to wrap my head around this. He sees that there's a women's alliance that Kuzi is in. I'm assuming he thinks Renee is in it. Probably. I'm assuming he thinks Claudia's in it because after Claudia left, that's when he said, can't trust these women. And that's kind of true, right? We did see that those women were having conversations. Kuzi, Claudia, Renee, Shania. And Santina even has had some talks with them, but we kind of know that she's not really with them, at least right now or when it happened. So he's wary of them. I don't know why he's so wary of them because I do think that they'd all be very happy to work with him, and I don't feel like they'd like. It's not like Kuzi has a connection to those women that's like stronger than anything she would have with Daniel, as far as I can see. And that's a pretty like good pool of people to work with, I think, at the very least in the short term. But he seems to be wary of them in general. I think that like he seems to feel like the major connections he has in the game are again those people he mentioned: Zach, Kuzi, Ty, Santina, which is kind of like a pseudo group in and of itself, and maybe he is in a sort of side group that consists of those people because we know that Kuzi feels like she's in with Ty to a degree as well. So maybe there is kind of like a side alliance happening there. We know that Zach was talking about wanting to work with Daniel. And again, we've seen that Kuzi is in on some stuff here and there. So That might be something, and maybe that's why he's wary of the women to a degree. It's difficult. It's difficult. Um, but that's about where Daniel seems to be at this point. Um, I'm assuming he would be happy to get Rob out this week, because it's another guy leaving, and he doesn't really have a connection to Rob, as far as I can tell. Rob leaving would also theoretically weaken Shania, Renee, and I guess Claudia to a degree, depending. Um, but I think he'd also be happy to get Renee out if that was an option. I don't think he's looking to take Hope out. He seems to have a good connection to Hope, but I don't think he knows yet that Hope is looking to take himself out. So again, difficult to tell. I'm sure Daniel is talking to the cameras way more often. So like getting one cam talk like this in the midst of what he probably thinks is a much greater conversation. Like he's talking with context that he thinks we probably have that we have no idea. So we'll see. Hopefully we get more of these in the future. Um, he is going to talk to Santina a little bit. Santina tells Daniel that he's in a good position with Zach, and Zach and Dan are close. So she thinks that he'll be good this week. So again, we know that Daniel is wary of Zach, but he very much does feel like he's. I think Daniel is essentially doing what JM was hoping to do with Zach, which is kind of like play up that like, hey, I can be used by you. Trust me, even though I don't really trust you. And it seems like it's relatively successful so far. But he also knows that that's not a sustainable position. Something is going to have to give. Renee is going to have a conversation with Rob. Rob says to Renee that he hopes he's good this week. He thinks he should be good, but you never know. Renee tells Rob, just be careful. Just be careful about promising too many things. Just be careful. He's like, what do you mean? She's like, I just have a feeling. I don't know what this is. This could be an indication that Renee knows that Rob is in some trouble, or it could just be Renee being Renee. I don't know, but it's worth pointing out because what else is there to point out? We get Dan in the HOH room talking to the cameras very briefly. Dan says to the cameras, I still need to talk to everyone. Of course, indicating that he hasn't really had many conversations yet. And he says, the more people I can reassure that I'm not going after them, the more likely they are to return the favor when they're HOH. Great. Very basic 101 HOH strategy. Good to hear it, though, because I have no idea what Dan is up to or what he thinks at all. I would imagine that in the context of Hope already having talked to Dan about volunteering for the block and wanting to go home, that this is probably Dan saying, okay, that's the plan then. I would assume that Dan is willing to go along with what Hope wants and send Hope home. And with that in mind, his mindset is, I now want to reassure everyone that is not Hope that they are safe with me. And then hopefully they'll be grateful that I kept them safe this week, essentially trying to make the most out of the situation with Hope kind of sending himself out. That's kind of what I'm thinking at this point. But again, I don't know or necessarily even think yet that that Zach or Ty has talked to Dan about what their real plan might be for the week at this point. So things could very much change. And again, we don't even get any kind of confirmation of what the noms will be or are at this point, because I assume that the noms have happened. So we'll see. The final tiny little piece we got at the very end was a conversation in the pantry with Rob, Zach, and Hope. And Rob was openly talking to Hope in front of Zach about Hope competing in the veto competition. Same sort of thing he was talking to Hope about when Hope told him that he was going on the block, where he's like, hey, just win that veto anyway, even if you don't plan to use it on yourself. Rob was essentially saying things along similar lines. to Hope again in front of Zach, which to me indicated that Zach does know that Hope has volunteered for the block. So what does all of this tell us? It's very difficult to tell. It is not super likely, but not entirely impossible that this is like all part of Zach's plan. We mentioned yesterday, I think, that it was possible that Hope went on the block as a pawn to make it seem like the guys weren't together in order to backdoor Rob. So it's possible, I mean, very theoretically possible that Hope is intentionally deceiving Rob to make it seem like he's going on the block to go home, but actually it's going to be Rob. I don't think that's the case. I don't think Hope is playing like that. However, what could be more likely is that Zach is totally fine with the idea of Hope volunteering for the block and is perfectly willing to let Hope go on the block, thinking that he'll leave the game, when in reality, Zach plans to push for a backdoor of Rob once Hope and somebody else are already on the block. Um, so if I were to guess, that's my guess as to what's happening right now. My best guess would be Hope plans to go up on the block, and he thinks he will go home. Dan probably thinks that's the case right now as well. Maybe Zach and Ty have talked to Dan about a backup plan. Maybe they haven't yet. But I would imagine that in Zach's mind, okay, fine, Hope goes up on the block, but I'm going to try and figure out a way to get Rob up there post veto and get Rob to go home instead of Hope. That's my assumption at this point. How successful will Zach be? I don't know. It probably depends on Dan and what happens with the veto, and also potentially who goes up next to Hope. I don't know. So we'll have to wait and see on all of that. There's a chance we get another drop tomorrow, in which case we will see both what the nominations were and also likely who the veto winner is. If not, we will have to wait until Monday, where we will see both of those things as well. So, until then, that's what I've got for you. Now, we had to reschedule the Survivor Stock Watch podcast. So the Survivor Stock Watch podcast currently tentatively scheduled for this time tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern. So if there is a drop tomorrow, then we're going to have to squeeze it in somewhere else. We weren't anticipating that there would be drops on the weekend. So this is all kind of last minute once again. But we will find a way. Don't worry. But for now, that's what we have. We'll be back Monday for sure with some drop coverage and as well as the stock watch on Monday night. So make sure you tune in for that. And apart from that, that's about it. As I said, Survivor Stock Watch is going to be now tomorrow. So make sure you tune in for that. Find me over on Twitch, twitch.tv/Taran Armstrong, hanging out, watching things like Big Brother and Survivor, playing games. We'll be playing some Goose Goose Duck on Sunday. And I'm dropping some Among Us videos. Last few Among Us videos before we get into the Goose Goose Duck videos as well. We've got some fun ones coming up. So make sure you check that out. And that's about what I've got. So thank you all so much for hanging out with me here today. Hopefully you got something out of this because there wasn't a whole lot. But, when there's not a lot, there's a lot of detective work that needs to be done. So thank you for hanging out. Thank you for joining me. And I will see all of you next time.